So it's 9:30. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. We have already 16 people here, and I want to welcome all of you to our second of the three racing seminars for returning racers. And Joe Frickton is the Commodore of Lake Erie Yacht Club, and he is going to present to us the rules review using his lovely animations. This is being recorded, so we're going to ask everybody to stay on mute. It's okay if your picture is showing, because then Joe can see your lovely faces. And if you have a question, just raise your hand on the screen and he might be able to see that. So take it away, Joe.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. As Cynthia said, my name's Joe Frickton. I don't think that Steve Loscheider is on this call, but I need to thank him. He is really the person who designed this course about 15 years ago. And he got all the animations, and really this is his thing. But I've been teaching it now for, I don't know, probably about 10 years or so. So you've definitely heard a lot of this stuff before if you've been to this presentation. But it's always good. I was reviewing the rules and the seminar, the outline for this, and I learned new stuff, even going through it again. So this is a really good refresher, and I feel like I know the rules well, but you always learn something new when you go through it. So what the way this is going to work is I sent you guys. Did everyone receive the handout outline emailed to them? This is the same one as previous years. So if you've had it from before, you can use that one. Or if you have it from an email from Cynthia or myself, then you can use that. And that is what we're going to do is we're going to go through the outline, and it is designed basically with a little intro, and then we just go through the rules almost sequentially. And then I have animations that Steve and I downloaded from a website out of Europe, and to kind of demonstrate the rules. But what I'd like you guys to do is, if you have any questions about any of the animations or the rules, to raise your hand. I'll be able to see your screens or see your images, but either unmute yourself and ask the question, or raise your hand and I'll call on you, because there's a lot of rules here, and it doesn't really work to kind of go back to it at the end. So it's better just to bring it up if you have a question right then and there. So that's and I've got one, let's see, I've got one question already from Anthony Armstrong, and that we'll address at the beginning here. And but again, if you have any questions, just shout them out. So there are a lot of rules we're going to go through today. And if you're kind of newer to sailing, don't feel like you need to really be an expert on these rules at the end of this. If you can, the goal of the rules itself, the rules themselves, is really just to get everyone around the race course as safely as possible. So a lot of the rules, sometimes people will disagree about the rules on the race course, and still the ultimate goal is for us to just not damage any of the boats. Especially, these boats are somewhat fragile. Gel coat chips off pretty easily, and holes can be put in the boats. I've seen them firsthand. I've had a hole put in my boat before. Luckily, I've never caused a hole in someone else's boat, so that's good. But what I would recommend when you get close to people, communication is really key. And talking to people about where you are, what your plans are, is really important for staying safe on the race course. And I'll get into, as we get through the rules, we'll talk about what the communication looks like and how I do it. But I really recommend that you talk to people, because we have our sail that has a little window, but that window is pretty small, so we don't necessarily see each other. Some people are hard of hearing sometimes, so the more you can communicate and yell to get so everyone knows where they are, the safer we all will be this summer on the course. So to start with, we are going to, I'm going to pull up, see. We have some newer people here on the Zoom call, and let's see here. Okay. So can everyone see this Windward Lured course?
Mm-hmm. You're in presentation mode, so you might want to just go to the plain one where you don't see the screen coming up.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sorry, guys. Hold on. Technical difficulties, but we are almost there. Okay, can you guys see? No, you still can't see it. Resume share. How's that? Now can you see the PowerPoint?
Nope. Oh, there it is.
Okay, so we're just gonna look at this. This is our, for the newer sailors we run Windward Lured courses. What this means is that we have a starting line at the leeward end of the lake, and then we sail up to the windward mark, which is directly upwind, and then we go down to the leeward mark, and we'll go around a couple times to get to the finish, depending on what the course is. And the finish line is either going to be on the windward part of the lake, next to the windward mark, or it's going to be right where the starting line was. So Anthony asked me, sent a question this morning about the course board and how we designate courses. So we have two ways, or that we have kind of two different course designations, and they are you'll either see W, A, and then a number, or LA and a number. So what WA3 means is that you're going to have a finish line will be to the windward, at the windward mark, so to the windward part of the course. And the A means there's an offset mark. So that offset is going to be right here, right off the windward mark. You have to go around both of that. And then the number 3, or that number there, indicates 3 windward legs. So this course that we have, that we see here, you'll see there are 3 windward legs, 3 lines going to windward. That would be, you would see WA3 on the course board of the committee boat. And in previous years, when we used to have we'd have like laps around. A WA3 is a 2.5. So 2 laps. There we go. If you look at Jamie's, you probably can't see Jamie because I'm sharing my screen, but the other type is an LA3, or an L. This would, if we finished to leeward, we would have that L meaning that the finish line is to leeward, meaning you're finishing going downwind. A is that offset mark, and 3 is still windward legs. So LA3 would be the same course, except for you would have one extra downwind leg, finishing to downwind. Now, and Anthony, we're gonna at the end of the presentation we'll be talking about starts more and going through all the flags. And at that point, I will I'll go through this again so you can understand it, and I'll send an email too. Okay. One other point that I just want to talk about here are ley lines. I'll be talking about ley lines as we get into some of the animations. And just so everyone knows, so they're clear, starboard ley line is the imaginary line that goes into, or both ley lines. It's an imaginary line that goes into a mark, a windward mark, or typically, but they also apply to leeward marks too. That if you can sail on a straight course and you'll be able to go around the mark. So a port ley line means you're coming in on port. We'll talk about starboard port in a little bit. And a starboard ley line meaning that you're coming into the mark on a starboard course.
Hey Joe, this is John Berg. The display of your presentation can be enlarged if you drag that bar over. Perfect. And then if you go over to the right side and you flip the arrow up, and then you remove all your menu. There you go. Perfect.
Okay. So thank you, John. So the next piece I want to talk about where we get our rules. And there are a number of places we get rules. The main place is the Racing Rules of Sailing. And you can actually, we have books available that at the shed for everyone to read if they want. You can buy a book for yourself, or you can get them for free if you want. If you go online to the let's see here. Here we go. If you go online to this website, sailing.org, this is the International Sailing Organization. They have copies of the rules for you to download and read and print off and use as you want. So don't feel like you need to spend money on the rules. So now we're going to talk about some terminology that we'll be using during the course, during the animations. And the first is the starboard port. So the starboard port is, if you're on starboard, the wind is hitting the starboard, the right side. You're on starboard tack if the wind is hitting the right side of your boat, and you're on a port tack if the wind is hitting the left side of your boat. And the only exception to that is if you're going downwind, and then it just depends on what side of the boat your boom is on. So if the boom is on the left side of your boat, that means that you're on a starboard tack or a starboard jibe, and going the opposite way too. We'll be seeing in the animations in a second how that works. Next is Windward Lured. So if this is going to be going through how, let me pull up share screen. So Windward Lured, I'm not as good as Bill Colburn at drawing animations.
Joe, you're doing great. I totally recognize what I'm looking at. Nice work.
Thank you. So it's pretty self-explanatory that the boat that's closer to the wind is to windward, and the boat that is downwind is to leeward. And the only exception to that is if you have addition to that is that these two boats right here that are next to each other, the windward boat is this boat right here, and the leeward boat is this boat right here. And the final definition that just to highlight for you guys is overlap. These are the rules that are on that website that you guys can download. So there's always a lot of confusion about overlap. And what I recommend is just to read the definition if you have any questions about it. So overlap is when a boat is clear astern of another, when her hull and equipment in normal position are behind a line of beam from the aftermost point of the other boat's hull and equipment in normal position. The other boat is clear ahead. They overlap when neither is clear astern. So what that means, I just want to go back to my drawing. So these two boats on the bottom are overlapped with each other. And this boat compared to this boat there's no overlap. So if you draw an imaginary line behind these two boats, this boat is clear astern, and these two boats are ahead. But they're overlapped with each other. So we'll now let's get into the rules, and you guys you'll be able to see kind of how these how the rules will apply as we see these boats. So the first four rules, we don't have any animations, but just want to highlight them because they're very important. Rule number one is probably the most important rule, is that we help people in danger. Even when you're out racing, we need to be helping people. And just to tell a quick story, a couple of years ago, we were going upwind, and myself and Bill Colburn was there, and Dave Mott was there, and probably two other people, and we were all kind of in a pack leading the race, probably going upwind, maybe up to the finish. And as we're going up, Dave Mott, he's hiking out, and he just lets go of everything and just kind of slumps down, and wasn't moving at all. He didn't fall out of his boat, but he was slumped down. And Bill Colburn immediately stopped racing and sailed over to him and to make sure he was okay. So, or if someone falls out of their boat, and we have safety boats out there to help, but we need to make sure as racers that we are taking care of each other, and we help people who are in danger. So that's kind of rule number one that we need to keep in mind. Rule number two is fair sailing. We don't have umpires out on Lake Harriet, and we are kind of self-policing. So that means that even if you violate a rule and no one sees you, you've still violated a rule, and you need to do a penalty if needed. And we can't take advantage of rules to hurt other people or do things. We need to just sail in a fair way. Number three is that we accept all the rules. Part of racing, and this is number 4 too, is it's our own personal decision to race. If we're going to, if it's your personal opinion that the wind is too high for you to sail, you have no obligation, you shouldn't sail. Just because a race is being held doesn't mean that you have to sail if the wind is outside of your wind limits. We do have wind limits that our race committee needs to follow, but if you decide to race, that's your decision and no one else's. So let's get into the rules of when boats meet. This is section 2 of the rules as you go through. If you ever download or go through the book, these are all these rules are combined. The section of when boats meet. And the first rule is Rule 10. And as you can use your the outline that I sent for the actual rule is there, but then Steve Loscheider, my commentary is right above that. So let's share screen. Okay. Now, can everyone see the animation here?
Yes.
Okay. So Rule 10. If you are on opposite tacks, the boat on starboard tack has right of way over the boat on port tack. So this is your classic starboard port. And red is on starboard because the wind is hitting red's the right side, the starboard side of his boat, and blue is on port because the wind is hitting the left side or the port side of the boat. So red's on starboard, blue needs to keep clear of red, either by tacking or ducking. And if blue doesn't, then blue has fouled red. Okay. Same thing here. Red is on starboard. The wind is hitting the starboard side, the right side of red, and blue is on port. So the wind is hitting the left side or the port side of the boat. So again, blue has to keep clear of red. Okay, now going downwind. Who need to keep clear? So raise your hand if you think. I'll play it. So raise your hand if blue needs to keep clear. I see one hand. Raise your hand if red needs to keep clear. So what, so is blue on, raise your hand if blue is on starboard. And red is on port or starboard. So red is on port and blue is on starboard. So going downwind, actually red needs to keep, red needs to keep clear because blue is on starboard. Now, how about here? Red is on starboard. Blue is on port. So blue keeps clear of red. We'll eventually talk about, in the next rule, we'll talk about being on the same tack and Windward Lured rules. But when you're on opposite tacks, starboard and port always take priority over windward leeward. So that's that first rule. No matter what, if you're on opposite tacks, and this comes up all the time in Lake Harriet, when you're coming downwind. So from a tactics standpoint, if blue wants to keep going, what blue should do is blue should jibe to get onto starboard. So they're both on the same tack. One more time. Okay. Number 2, rules 11 and 12. If you're on the same tack, the leeward boat has right of way over the windward boat. So the same tack, you're both on starboard or both on port. The leeward boat has right of way over the windward boat. And a boat coming up from behind can't hit the boat ahead. This is rule 11 and 12. So both these boats are on starboard. Red is to leeward of blue. So red has right of way over blue, and blue has to keep clear of red. How about here? Raise your hand if blue needs to keep clear. Raise your hand if red needs to keep clear. Okay, Cynthia, why do you think red needs to keep clear?
Because blue is windward. They're both on the same tack. So the windward rule comes into effect now.
So if you're windward lured, always the leeward boat has right of way over the blue boat. So blue needs to keep clear of red because they're both on the same tack. Now, going back to the definition of overlap, they're both next to each other. So what we look at is what side of the boat their boom is on. So blue is to leeward of red. So red needs to keep clear of blue. Now here, there is, again, same rules, but the difference is that from those previous animations that there's no overlap. So what we're looking at is a line here. An imaginary line. So red is clear astern of blue. So there's no overlap. If red comes down over here, then there is an overlap. But right now, blue is right away over red. If red was in this position where green is, then green would have right of way over blue. Okay. Oh, looks like Bro might have a question.
No, sorry.
Okay. Okay, number 3. If you're passing another boat and are on the same tack, you cannot sail above your proper course, which means the course that is fastest around the course, or the direction that is fastest around the course. So this also comes up a fair amount on Lake Harriet. There was a question, so starboard port always trumps windward leeward. Yes. Jim, starboard port is always that's the number one rule. And then windward lured is always secondary to that. So if you're on opposite tack, windward lured only applies when you're on the same tack. Okay, so this is a kind of the passing rule that if you're passing someone, you cannot take them above their proper course.
Ooh.
So here, blue is passing red. So blue's going faster than red and coming from clear astern to overlap and passing red. So that means that blue can't head red up, can't take red up. Let me just annotate that. So red can keep sailing red's proper course, her proper course, meaning straight to the buoy, or maybe to a puff or something like that. And blue cannot. Blue has right of way over red because they're both on the same tack. They're both on port, but blue is to leeward of red, so blue cannot force red up. Here, there are a couple exceptions to that I always like to highlight because this is one that we all need to remember every year.
So that diagram depends on where the buoy is, right?
Correct. Let's assume that the buoy on that last one, let's assume the buoy is right downwind. The exception to that, though, is if, let's say, blue sees a puff over on the side to the left of red and wants to sail over to that puff, then technically, blue would have the right to sail over to that puff, although it puts blue into a little bit of a difficult, like red could say, no, that's not the fastest way. And it creates a little bit more of a potential for a conflict and a protest situation. So blue's better off sailing behind red over to that puff than to force red over.
Remind me how blue is the windward boat in the situation, correct?
Correct.
No,
And so,
Yeah, go ahead.
blue is the leeward boat in this.
Well, blue started as the windward boat, and then so there was no overlap at the start of this. So right now, red, or maybe like a couple seconds earlier, red was clear ahead of blue, so there was no overlap. So red had a right of way over blue.
and once they get overlapped, and the wind is clearly astern,
Then blue has right of way over red.
But the direction, so this is where English and sailing words are a little different. English says blue's windward. It's closer to where the wind's coming from. But sailing rules wise, blue is leeward because use the booms hanging off those boats. Blue is to the side that, like it doesn't really matter where the wind's coming from in that the boom is pointing at the leeward boat.
Now that there's overlap, that's what that. Before that, and this is where this passing rule comes into play. When blue was clear astern or behind red, fully behind red, then red had right of way over blue. But when that overlap happens, then blue gets right of way over red. And let me just show you guys I want to show you the definition. Of overlap, so you can see where that. So these terms always apply to boats on the same tack. They apply to boats on opposite tacks only when Rule 18 applies between them, or when boats are sailing more than 90 degrees from the true wind. So when we are going downwind, we're always looking at where the boom is, and that's also right. This Windward Lured. When sailing by the lee or directly downwind, her leeward side is the side on which her mainsail lies. So when we have here, when we're passing, blue is clear astern, then red is right of way over blue. When blue is overlapped with red, then blue has right of way, except because blue is passing, blue can't go wherever blue wants to go. Red has some rights to sail her proper course.
And if you're in the middle of the race and blue is still astern, but is clearly advancing on red, can red, head up a little bit and try to disadvantage blue?
Yeah. So what?
Yeah. From a strategy standpoint, that's intelligent.
That what red's from a strategy tactic standpoint, what red should do is sail. Red should just have clear wind to sail fast. But if, let's say you're right in front of the, we're going to get into the mark room. Let's say you're close to the mark, and you don't care about speed. You only care about staying ahead of blue. So there's no overlap. So what red would do is sail, like just get right in front of blue and not let blue get in front or get any overlap. At that situation.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I had a couple questions here. So boom from Rajiv. So boom of windward points to lured boat. So that's correct. Yeah. If the windward boat going downwind, if they're next to each other, red is the windward boat because red's boom is pointing to the leeward boat. And then from Jim, proper course on a downwind leg can be 45 degrees or more either side. So once overlapped outside of two boats, the blue boat can head the other boat off. It's just not always fastest. There's no real rule about 45 degrees or what direction you're going. It's just a judgment about what a proper course is. And there's a lot of gray area there. So you can use that gray area to your advantage or disadvantage as you need. Most likely on an MC, sailing to the mark is the fastest way to get around the course going downwind. And then John Getzinger, two boats are close hauled as they approach the finish line on a leg to windward. At the zone, 3 boat lengths from the flag, the leeward boat is clear ahead. If an overlap develops before the finish, must the leeward boat allow? So we'll talk about finishes when we get closer. We have a whole section on finishing. We'll talk about finish lines then.
Joe?
I have a couple more animations on this passing.
Joe, may I add some color commentary?
Sure.
This is Bill. In that case of the last one, if the blue boat tucks in there and then heads up the red, and we sail together day after day, summer after summer, year after year, and I think that's another consideration, like the rules versus the friendships. Versus like, is it really going to help you get around the course more quickly to be doing like tank warfare with one person?
Well, that's a really good point. I think I agree with you, Bill, 100%. And the fastest boats the boats that typically win the races are the ones that don't get fouled up with other boats. The fastest going, especially going downwind where a lot of this stuff happens, you don't really want to be next to other boats because you're going to get bad wind, bad air. So you want to like keep clear of people, even if that, you get down to a lured mark and you're really like pushing to stay ahead of someone. Sometimes letting them go and getting around the mark clean is a lot faster than getting tangled up and getting your head out of going fast.
And I've noticed that often with Ryan, if I've got a slight edge on Ryan going towards a buoy and his nose is like coming up to my stern, he just goes wide. He does not like try to win the small race. He does win the big race, which is so like, and so anyway.
Okay, so the exception to this, there are two exceptions to this passing rule. One is that it only applies if you are passing within 2 hull lengths of the other boat. So that means that technically if blue is coming down here, blue got overlapped, sailed outside of 2 hull lengths, so sails wide, and then comes back at red, then blue can push red up. And we've had some disagreement about this in the past, I know. But now blue can sail up as blue wants there. The other quick exception, we'll just get through this part because this one doesn't come up very often, only in team racing, which we do team racing every year. So it's really fun. But you can also head people as overlap, not from behind, but by jibing. So blue sails and there's an overlap and jibes and then jibes back. Now blue can head red up. We don't need to get into that though. Okay, if you're tacking, and number 4, if you're tacking, you have to stay out of the way of a boat sailing in a straight line. So as red is tacking, red does not have right of way until red. So they're both on port right now. And as red is going to tack here, red doesn't have right of way until red finishes the tack. So when does, I'm going to give you 3 options. When does red finish the tack? Is it when red starts turning the boat? 4 options. When red starts finishing the boat, starts the tack, goes past head to wind, comes on a close hulled course, or pulls in her sail. So raise your hand if it's when red starts the tack. Raise your hand if it's when red goes just across head to wind. We got a couple there. Raise your hand when red goes to a close hulled course. And raise your hand if it's when red pulls their sail in. Couple. So the rule is when red gets to a close hulled course. So it doesn't matter if you drop your main sheet. If you're on port, and this is what happens in this animation here. Red starts to tack, gets to a close hulled course and luffs. Probably what happens here, red has dropped her main sheet. Shoot. So it has nothing to do with the sail trim. The only thing that matters is the actual course, which is a close hulled course. And this is an area where communication, I think, is really key. When I sail, if I'm red here, what I do is I tell blue I'm going to tack. And I will tell blue that, okay, I'm going to tack in 3 seconds. And then when I start tacking, I'll yell that. I'll say tacking. And then when I finish the tack, I I say starboard immediately. And I tell everyone that. And then the benefit of that is that if there is a protest, I've kind of established when I've finished my tack. And typically, as long as blue is at least, 10 to 15 feet away, then I know that I'm in the right and they're wrong. Or they're not wrong, but they have to keep clear of me. So I will out every time I tack, if there's any boat that's close, and sometimes even I'm just talking to myself, I'll say tacking and then completed tack or tacked or starboard or something like that to establish the fact that I'm now on a close hold course. And that communication really helps blue figure out what they want to do. And so it's really key so you don't get into we don't hit each other, is to communicate that type of situation. The other thing you can do is if you're red and you think you're too close to blue, you can ask blue if you have room to tack. And so if I'm red, I'll say, blue, do I have room to tack? And they might answer you or they might not. But if they do answer you, then you can tack. You don't even need to worry about it. And blue, typically, let's say blue wants to keep sailing on a port course to get to the right side, and the red wants to go to the left. Well, blue wants to make sure that red can tack and just sail away and not affect blue. So blue will let red go, even if blue is going to duck down underneath red. So blue might want to it looks like red is really screwed up, dropped her main sheet. And so what blue might want to do is not to protest here, but just duck underneath and keep sailing fast and sailing away.
But the protest would come because you would have to make the argument that the tack or the going over to starboard caused the blue boat to have to alter its course, right?
If they were close enough that blue had to alter her course before red got onto a starboard tack.
Right.
So if it's during the tack.
Right.
So this has also come up. We've had a lot of, about 10 years ago, a lot of protests around this next number 5. Anytime you have the right of way, you may turn towards another boat, but you must be sure that the other boat has enough time and space to get out of the way. So here we have both boats are in starboard and they're overlapped. So that means that red has right of way over blue. Blue has to keep clear. But they're both on the same, they're far enough away from each other that they can just keep sailing straight. Blue doesn't have to start turning, keeping clear until red alters her course. So once red starts sailing and going up, pushing blue up, that's when blue has to get out of the way. And blue needs enough time and opportunity to keep clear. And again, this is a time when communication is key. If you're red and you're trying to really slow blue down, maybe at a finish or something like that, you want to make sure that blue understands that blue needs to stay away. So if I'm red and I'm going to take blue up right at the finish line, I'll say to blue, okay, blue, I'm going to head you up right now. And then I'll start heading him up. And then blue's had plenty of opportunity and forewarning to stay out of the way. Now, me saying stuff to him or her doesn't do anything. It's only when I start moving the boat. But if we ever get into a protest room, then I can tell the people on the protest committee that I was communicating and blue knew that I was going to head them up and blue didn't stay out of the way. So communication is always key, and especially around the starting line, which we'll get into in a second. Number 6, you must avoid collisions if possible. So avoiding contact. So this is just that classic starboard port. If red is on starboard and blue's on port, red and blue doesn't see, this happens all the time, blue doesn't see red. Red needs to avoid contact. Red can't just plow into blue. And now technically, if that did happen, blue is still in the wrong because blue is on port and red is on starboard. But if red still has violated Rule 14 by not avoiding contact. And where this comes into play is that if blue is damaged by that, by red avoiding contact, or if there's an injury, then red can be disqualified from the race, even if red is on starboard. So if you are the number 7, if you make a right-of-way boat have to change their course to avoid hitting you, you must take a penalty. And a penalty is 2 tacks and 2 jibes. In order to protest someone, so in this scenario, let's take out the avoiding contact. If to force blue to do turns, red has to say protest to blue. And the word protest is a magic word in sailing. Blue is not obligated to do turns unless red says the word protest. You can't say do your turns or you fouled me or hey or some expletive. You need to say the word protest to force blue to do turns. Now blue, from that Rule 3 fair sailing, if blue fouls red, blue should do turns regardless. But if there is going to be a protest, red has to say the word protest as quickly as possible. Now, blue doesn't have to hear the word protest. All red has to do is say that word. It's a magic word. So if blue can't say, oh, I didn't hear you say that, but red has to say protest right away. So if I'm going to protest someone, I'll say protest 2644. And I try to identify the sail and the boat so they know it's them. And I try to say it as loud as possible.
And Joe,
yeah.
if I was the red boat in that situation, I would call out starboard ahead of time, just in case the blue boat didn't see me, because it's very common that the boat on port can't see the red boat coming. It's kind of in a blind spot. So
Yeah.
I would start with starboard and they don't respond and I have to change my course. Then I go yell protest.
Yeah, communication is key on that. Throughout the course, like I said at the beginning, we need to be talking to each other and making sure we see each other. But even if you say starboard and then red to attack to stay out of the way, blue technically doesn't need to do anything until red says that word protest. It's the one magic word. Okay, now we'll talk about marks and obstructions.
Did Ryan have a comment?
Oh, yeah. So I was just going to say, sometimes it's hard to hear them say protest. So if you know you fouled someone, it's safe to just do your turns because they might have said it just not loudly, and you don't want to get in a disputed protest hearing about whether they said that later, because then you might get disqualified. So it's safe to do your turns even if you didn't hear them say protest.
And MCs tack and jibe very quickly. So you can do your turns and really not lose that much and still pass them. So you're better off just do your turns and keep sailing. Don't get into an argument. Just do the turns. It's not worth
practice your turns. Practice your turns.
Yeah, I mean, especially practicing your turns when you're hitting a mark. Yeah, that happens so often, and the quicker you do that, the quicker you can keep racing. Okay, so marks and obstructions. we'll first talk about marks, then we'll do a couple on obstructions. So number 9, when you are 3 boat lengths from a mark, you have to give any boat between you and the mark room to round it or pass it. So on Lake Harriet, what is our 3 boat length circle? How far is that? I see Jamie, I think, is the winner. He did the math the fastest, but it's 48 feet. Sometimes it's a good idea to walk that off before the season, and just to get a general idea of where it is. But 48 feet, it's pretty big, but so just kind of keep that in your head. So we'll get into some animations, and I think that communication is the most important when you get to the marks, when you're at windward mark, and more importantly at the leeward mark. So this is the light blue circle is the zone, the 3 boat length circle. And here, blue and red are overlapped. Blue is the inside boat to red. And so that means that blue has room to sail to the mark and to round it. And that means that blue needs enough room to jibe to get around that mark. Same one, we'll see that. So blue has to jibe here to get around the mark. That means that red needs to keep clear of blue to allow blue to jibe. So red needs to stay away. But that room to sail to the mark and around it doesn't mean you have unlimited room. So in this animation, red and blue are both on port tack, and there's overlap. So technically, red has right of way over blue, except for the mark room. So blue has room to sail to the mark and around. It has mark room, but that's the extent of the room. Blue can't keep sailing downwind because that's more room than blue needed to get around the mark. So red can still force blue to sail close to the mark. So blue can't sail down. So here, red sails outside and is going to sail low to give blue enough room to get around the mark, but blue doesn't round up and keeps going down. So now red blue is probably fouling red if red red can take blue up closer to the mark. This has come up at protest hearings on Lake Harriet before.
Joe, I have a question. How perfect of a rounding does blue need to do?
They need to do the seaman-like rounding is the definition, but that means that's a pretty general term. I would say as long as they're within a boat width from the mark, they're probably okay. But if they sail, but it comes into a gray area there of how far you're sailing away from the mark. So I think that as long as you're doing your best to get around the mark, then you're okay. But if you drop your, if you drop the tiller or something like that, you're getting into more of a danger zone. So just do your best to get around the mark.
Yeah, I mean, is wind here a factor at all? Because
Yep.
Sometimes when there's shifts or whatever in the wind and blue comes down, he can't get himself locked up around the buoy. He's got to try to pick up the wind some.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the conditions play a factor. And also just from a protest, if it ever went to a protest hearing, the inside boat coming around the mark will typically win that, will win that protest right at that mark, because I'd say the general understanding is that if a contact happened right at the mark, then it would be then blue is going to win because blue is inside. It's only if you get past the mark and further away where red might have more of an argument.
I have another piece of color commentary. I have written U.S. sailing about this before. The term seaman-like manner is completely ambiguous, and I've written that, and it's also gender biased. And in my letter to U.S. sailing, I said I don't want to raise my daughter to be a seaman. I also suggested that a better phrase would be in control.
There you go. We could change our sailing instructions.
Right. They thanked me for my input, but they didn't change.
Okay, so the bigger areas for dispute.
I have one quick question back to that. So if the blue boat in that case, they're trying to do their best, but let's say they clip the buoy, can they technically say, I don't have to do a penalty because I tried to do my best, but the red boat gave me no room? Or if you touch the buoy, you do your donut?
I probably, so if you are forced into the mark, then you don't have to do a turn, but you really should be protesting red in that scenario, if you're blue. If you screw up and accidentally hit the buoy, and red's right there, but red didn't force you up, then you do need to do your turn. And just to address it, if you do hit the buoy, it's only one tack and one jibe, so one circle. It's not two. But yeah, if you're forced into a mark and you have right of way, then you are exonerated and you don't have to do your turn.
And I think that's where it's helpful to remind red, I need mark room. If you feel like you're not going to make it and hit the buoy because they're pushing you, you just remind them, I have mark room. And in other words, get away from me.
So the biggest area of dispute around lured marks is when you're overlapped or when are you in the zone. So what I always do, and I do this every single time I get to a lured mark, every race, people, you probably all heard me say it many times, that when I get down to the zone, I always announce I always say 3 boat lengths as soon as I get to the zone. So if I'm green in this scenario, as soon as I think that I'm close, I say 3 boat lengths. I'll say blue, I need mark room. Even if it's clear, all I'm doing is establishing what's going on. And I'll tell red too, if I'm green, I have room to sail. I have mark room. And so there's no dispute at all. And we want to make it crystal clear. So if I'm green, I always will announce it every single time, even if it's clear. The other nice thing about that is if it ever goes to a protest committee, is that now you've communicated, and if they don't dispute you at that time, then you probably are going to win that protest. So here, blue is, if I could do a, so right now, green has hit the mark, hit the zone, the 3 boat length circle. And there's overlap between blue and green, and red is clear behind. So right now, green has right of way, has mark room over both red and blue. But blue hasn't hit the zone yet, so we don't know what's going to happen between blue and red yet.
You do know what's going on with green and red.
Yeah, green. Yeah, you're right. Green has right of way over red and blue. So now red accelerated. And now there's overlap between blue and red. And red is the inside boat, so red has mark room over blue. Okay, so similar scenario. Green is coming around. Green now has mark room. Now red has mark room over blue. So in order of priority, it goes green, then red, then blue. But understand also that blue is to leeward of red, and they're both on the same tack. So what needs to happen here, green is slowing down. Blue needs to sail away to give green, to give red room. Shoot, hold on. So blue really needs to slow down and make sure that red has enough room to avoid green. And red's in a tough spot here, but because red might have to go almost dead downwind to stay clear of green. This happens a fair amount. So now red has hit the zone here. And it looks like red is clear, or excuse me, blue has hit the zone and blue is clear ahead of red. So now blue has right of way, has mark room. But this happens all the time where red speeds up and gets caught here. So red needs to, what red should be doing in this scenario is slowing her boat down and sailing right behind blue to get a fast rounding. Okay, so the question on this one, the quiz is, which boat needs to give room to red? We'll ignore yellow and brown. Does anyone think that green needs to give room to red? No? How about blue? Does blue need to give room to red?
Yes.
Looks like everyone has got the right answer. So just to walk you guys through it. So yellow hits the zone first. So yellow gets mark room, and then red, and then green.
Brown.
Or excuse me, yellow, brown, and then green. And now red has hit the zone, but blue is still outside of the zone here. And so blue, this happens occasionally. We have this kind of pinwheel going around the mark. Blue needs to keep blue needs to stay clear and slow down and sail right behind red to get a good rounding. Okay, now we'll talk about some windward. So this happens from time, probably every race. Red is on a starboard ley line. Red, they're both on starboard tack here, and they hit the zone. Red is the inside, and they're both overlap. So red has mark room. Oh, shoot.
Yeah. Jeez.
And red can sail to the mark and around it. Now, the exception here is if you come head to wind, then you lose your mark room. So you don't have any more mark room. And the key to that is coming head to wind. It's not jibing. Jibing, you don't lose your mark room. But if you come head to wind, then you lose your mark room. So if red tries to shoot the windward mark here and red ends up tacking, then red's on port with blue on starboard, and red doesn't have mark room anymore. So red is going to have to do turns at that point. And it's probably slow too. But sometimes you're just in this bad situation. It happens to all of us. And the key is to stay. If you don't think you're going to make it, the best thing to do, if you're coming up here, let's say it's a light wind day and you don't have the speed to get around the mark, you're way better off if there's room behind blue is not to just shoot the mark, but be conservative, slow down, tack behind blue, and then tack again. And you'll stay close to blue. You might lose that one boat, but if you follow blue, you're gonna lose way more speed, and you're gonna have to do 2 turns, and you'll be a lot further behind than just slowing down and tacking and then tacking again. You're way better off, way faster. Okay, so here, red's on port, blue is on starboard. And the key to this animation, they're in the zone, but mark room only applies when you're overlapped here. And because they're not on the same tack, then they're not considered overlapped. And so red is on port, red needs to keep clear of blue. So this happens, red's on the port ley line, sailing into the mark. If red tacks inside the zone, inside the 3 boat length circle, red doesn't have mark room and needs to keep clear of blue. But this is okay now. Blue will tack outside of the zone. And then once she hits the zone, the blue is clear ahead of red. And so blue has mark room over red. Okay. Here, blue hit the zone and then tacks. Now blue has lost, doesn't have, even though blue is clear ahead, blue doesn't have mark room because blue came head to wind inside the zone. One more piece on mark room that I want to talk about. I'll go back to an earlier on the lured. Okay, so if there's ever any doubt that whether or not you've made an overlap or broken an overlap, we always assume that the status quo stayed the same. So let's say in this scenario, let's just focus on green and blue. If, I guess let's focus on red and blue. So if there's some dispute about if it was really close, red is trying to get that overlap on blue, and we're not sure if red was able to get that overlap when they hit the zone, we always assume that red didn't get the overlap. And vice versa, if blue, let's say there's clearly an overlap and blue is trying to squeak out and break that overlap to be clear ahead, so blue doesn't have to give mark room to red. We want to, we always assume that blue didn't break the overlap. We always assume the status quo. Okay, obstructions. A right-of-way boat, a moored boat, shore, or a dock are obstructions, and an outside boat must give way to an inside boat. So where this comes up, obstructions, it doesn't come up very often, but occasionally in when we have a starboard boat. So green's on starboard has right-of-way to red and to blue, but between red and blue, blue has right-of-way over red. So green is considered an obstruction. And so blue needs to give room to red to avoid green. So that means blue has to go down, has to head down to give red room to sail around green. So this is, I guess, the only other area where you have a magic words. So blue can ask for room to tack in this scenario when there's an obstruction. And if blue asks for that, then green has to tack to give room. So when blue asks for room to tack, green has to tack, and blue can then tack. However, if red in this scenario asks for room to tack, blue tacks, and then red doesn't tack, then blue can protest red. So the exception to obstructions is we're going to talk about starting here in a little bit. There's no room at a starting line. So this is called barging for people who are newer. And so blue, coming into this boat, they're inside a 3 boat length circle, but there's no room to round it at the start. Okay, so let's go to starting. We're going to just go through. So the general rule, the starting line is an imaginary line between buoy and the committee boat. And we do a timing sequence for people who are newer. You must be completely behind the starting line. And if you are not behind the starting line at the time of the start, then you need to, on Lake Harriet, you need to sail around. If you are over early, you need to sail around the ends and then restart. And if you're returning back, if you are over early, you need to avoid other boats that have started correctly. So we'll just go through the starting sequence really quick so people know what that looks like.
Well, maybe you want to mention too that the yellow flag, not the yellow flag, but the I flag has to be flown.
Yeah, on Lake Harriet, we always fly an I flag, meaning you need to round the ends. There is another flag, a P flag, that you could do a dip start, but we don't really need to address that here because we never do. We always do an I flag on Lake Harriet. So these are just a quick introduction to our flag systems that we see typically out there. This is the postponement flag that you'll see. This means that we're not going to start the race while this flag is up. We have a class flag. We have the MC class flag and an M class flag. This is the I flag that you'll see during our starting sequence. This is that round the ends rule. There's a different flag if we do a dip start, but this is what we always use. If you see this flag, this is life jackets. The race committee will always use this flag in May, and if the wind is ever really heavy or it's cold, sometimes in late September, we'll use the Y flag. And if you don't wear your life jackets when this is being flown, then you can be disqualified for that. So this is we have a 5-minute starting sequence. Now last year during COVID, or we were more deeply into COVID, we did a 3-minute starting sequence, but this year we're going back to our regular starting sequence. You'll hear a horn at 5 minutes, and that's when our class flag goes up, either the M flag or the MC flag. At 4 minutes, we'll have that's when the actual rules go into effect. So we're technically not racing until we're 4 minutes to go, and you'll typically see an I flag. That means if you're over early, you need to round the ends, but there's a couple other ones, a Z flag and a black flag that we've flown at the Die Hard Regatta occasionally, but we typically don't do that on our normal regular club sailing. So that's at 4 minutes to go. You'll hear a horn, and the I flag goes up, and then with 1 minute to go, the I flag comes down, and then at 0, you'll hear another horn, and that's when you can start. So just for an MC, at 5 minutes to go, you'll see this MC flag. 4 minutes to go, you'll see the MC flag and the I flag. 1 minute to go, just the class flag MC, and then at the start, the class flag comes down. If someone's over early, you're going to hear one horn, and this is the individual recall flag. And this is actually the general recall flag. If the race committee can't determine who's over early, he or she will do 2 horns and then fly this flag, and then we start over. And we start the starting sequence over completely. So let's get into some starting sequence animations here. So we'll be kind of taking all the rules here, and they all come together. We'll use all the rules here in the starting line, and then finish after that. So this is just that same rule about barging. Blue is lured of red. Red does not have mark room. There's no mark room at the start. And blue can come to a close hauled course, and red needs to tack away or duck below blue. This is kind of a different application to that same rule, is if you guys are both sailing below here, and you're red and blue are sailing in a straight line to the starting line, and red starts turning up after or excuse me, blue starts turning up after red is immediately behind the committee boat. Red doesn't have any place to go in this scenario. And so red then would technically have room to get around because then the committee boat is an obstruction. So this happens occasionally, but not very often. And it's only when blue starts to, if red can't stay out of the way, like physically doesn't have any room to get out of the way, then blue would have to allow red to get around the committee boat. Okay, let's see, next one. So they're both on, so red is passing behind blue, and now we have overlap. The rule on passing and heading people above the proper course doesn't apply at the starting line because there is no proper course before the start. It does apply after the start, but before the start, there's no proper course. So red can avoid, or red can push blue wherever, and red is right away to do whatever. Red does need to give room to give blue time and opportunity to stay out of the way. So if blue is luffing here and blue doesn't have any speed to turn, red needs to make sure, or let's say it's light wind day, let's say there's no wind, we're just kind of flat or barely moving. If red comes in and blue can't, like blue puts her tiller all the way to the side and nothing happens to the boat, doesn't turn because the boat isn't moving, red needs to give more time and opportunity to blue to stay out of the way. So here, blue is on starboard, red is on port. Blue doesn't need to worry about red at all at this point because of that starboard port. Once red tacks, now blue needs to pull in her sail to avoid red and can't keep luffing. Now, maybe there wasn't enough time and opportunity in this scenario. But what blue needs to do is keep clear. Bill Colburn I might have just jumped off. He asked if there are any changes to the new rules this year. There are no new changes that affect us at all. No, he's off. I'll text him now. Okay. Now, who's right? Who needed to, who's wrong in this scenario? Or who's right in the scenario? Who thinks blue fouled red? Raise your hand. Who thinks red fouled blue? Okay, so I would agree with the red. So red fouls blue because red hasn't completed her tack by the time the contact happened. Red needs to go to a close hauled course to get onto starboard to get right of way, to be right away over blue. Oh, go back to that one. So now blue, there's right of way. Blue needs to keep clear, and blue needs to pull her sail in right away because red's on a close hauled course and going fast. And red can push blue up and push blue over the starting line. But that's it. So here, let me go back to that one. Oh, shoot. Okay, we see this from time to time. So green is on starboard. Well, they're all on starboard. And green is luffing here and can't really move or do anything. Green can't stay out of the way or do anything. And also green is probably has right of way over both blue and red. So here green is considered an obstruction, and red needs to give room to blue to avoid green.
I guess I'm a little confused about, so some of the earlier animations, blue was luffing, but it was, it wasn't sort of head to wind, like green was in that last illustration where she was pretty much in irons right there, almost, right, with the sail just a little bit over. How is green different there than blue, who was a little bit more, the drift course was a little bit more, along the start line. So the boat had some boat speed laterally. That makes a difference, huh?
Yeah, you're right. I guess I take back my comment about about green's right of way, because green is in irons. So green is like in the process of tacking and doesn't have rights. But between red and blue, I guess this animation shows more between red and blue, that green is considered an obstruction because green can't physically get out of the way. So green is probably wrong here still. Although this might be a situation where green could be in a close hold course. We don't really know, maybe because of this. And it's, when you can't really draw a fine line about being on a close hold course or not. However, so between red and blue, red has right of way over blue by being the lured boat, but green is physically in the way and no one can get, and green can't get out of the way. So red needs to bear off to allow blue to get around green.
But couldn't blue also head up at this point? I mean, they may be over the line, but.
Say that one more time.
Couldn't blue be headed up at this point?
Yes, blue could be. So red could head blue up. And if red wanted to. So what red needs to make a decision, I guess, what red wants to do. If I'm red, though, what I do just from a strategy standpoint or tactic standpoint is I would sail fast, unless the pin is right below green. I would sail fast and get ahead of blue and green. And then, because then you're the lured boat over all three boats of those other two, you're the lured boat, and you can then bear off and get speed and be ahead of them.
If I understood the earlier question correctly, a little differently than I think what you were answering, Joe. One thing is, once blue gets behind green, like to leeward of green in a way with some overlap, then yes, green has to stay clear of blue at that point. Actually, blue was overtaking. So that's the key difference from the earlier animation. Red was not an overtaking boat when it tacked below blue. But in this case,
the overtaking doesn't apply.
Okay, so green would have to stay clear of blue once blue hooks under. But before blue hooks under, like at this point, if green just had headed up and not been tacking, let's say, so if this point they came in on starboard, they headed up, they're not tacking, blue has to stay clear of green until blue gets down under it, and then green has to stay clear of blue.
You're right, Jamie, on that, definitely. And it's almost like, just like the animation with the committee boat, it'd be like, it's a same like barging thing, where blue needs to, once blue gets underneath green, then red needs to keep clear. So just from a strategy standpoint, again, though, I would, and this is more for next week, I guess, but red would want to push blue up if red wants to start right here and allow, so if red can go head to wind here to push blue up, allow green to go down here, and then red has room to start right here. Red's other option from a strategy tactics standpoint is to sail down below and then up, and then allow blue to go right here and be below green. And now red's got both boats head to wind, and then red can bear off and then start. Okay. So here, this happens again on here all the time. I'm looking at some of the pictures. I can think about specific times when some of these sailors have done this, or I've done it to people myself. Red wants to start, needs to get into the starting line someplace here. So red is going to push their way in. Red can do that. Red can pass in and do that, but red needs to give room, give blue an opportunity to get away. So red can head blue up, but if there's no room, like if blue can physically can't get out of the way, then red needs to not go there. And so, especially with green right there, this is kind of a dangerous move for red. Red's better move is to sail below green probably and start below green. But technically from a rule standpoint, red can go in there between green and blue, but red needs to stay clear of green while also giving blue time and opportunity to stay away. Or like Jim Marquardt has done many times, head blue up first over the line and then sail below green and get a good start. Okay, next one. Oh, shoot. This is just showing the proper course piece. There's no proper course. You come behind. You can head people up or not, as long as you stay clear. You can skip that one. We've kind of done this. So if you're over early, here red was over early. What we're going to see is that individual recall flag comes up. And then what red needs to do is to sail around the ends. So that means red needs to sail around the mark and go, or around the committee boat and then go. Okay, red is over early here. Red still has right of way, or excuse me, blue's over early. Blue has right of way over red as long as they keep sailing. Compared to here, blue's over early. That's the individual recalls for blue. Blue is heading back to the line. Once you start heading back, then you need to keep clear of all other boats. Once you start heading back, but before that, it's not, if you're over early, and you're on starboard, you can still keep sailing until you can get out of the way of other people. So you still have those right of way until you start turning back to the course, back to the starting line, I mean. Okay, now we are going to be on finishing. So John Getzinger, get your question ready. So finishing, once any part of your boat crosses the finish line, you're finished. You are done racing when you leave the finishing area. And if you hit a mark, you must do a 1-turn penalty and refinish. That's the general rule. So this is the finish line. Blue has finished because blue has crossed it, just her bow has crossed the finish line, but blue is still racing. So blue is on port, red is on starboard, and blue fouls red here. So blue has to do a 720, or do 2 tacks, 2 jibes, and then refinish. So blue finishes. Again, this is that same rule.
Oops.
And doesn't stay clear of red. They cross the finish line and then you just kind of let everything go and you stop thinking about it. As long as you're in the finishing area, which I consider to be any place that's within a boat length of the starting line to the sides of the starting line. So even if you're outside of the committee boat or outside the pin, if you're within a boat length of those, then you're still racing and you're still subject to the same port starboard rules. So they're both on port. Red's bow goes over the finish line, finishes ahead of blue, and then blue, in order to avoid hitting people, goes in reverse, goes backwards, and then sails away. You don't need to fully go across the finish line to finish. All you need is just one little part of your boat to go across the finish line, then you can back up if you need. This happens occasionally in light air conditions, and you just kind of float across and then you float away. That's fine.
That's the one.
Here it is. So coming in here, they're both on port. So they're on the same tack and they're overlapped. They come into the zone. Blue has mark room on red. So red needs to give room to blue and to finish.
Hey, so Joe, supposing red does not give mark room and blue ends up hitting the buoy, what happens then?
Blue does not have to do turns because blue will be exonerated because blue is fouled to hit the mark. Blue still needs to finish though. It's not
So
like,
yeah, okay.
So blue would have to, would protest red.
Okay.
And then probably sail around and finish. So let me get my animator up here really quick. So if blue hits the mark and red, or let's say blue doesn't hit the mark, but blue just tacks away.
Okay.
Because blue doesn't want to hit the mark. Blue needs to protest red and then sail around and then finish.
So what if there's a green boat which finishes before blue because of that? What happens then?
Probably green's going to finish ahead.
Okay.
You can ask for a redress, and there's a whole procedure for asking for redress. If you're fouled and you lose a boat, you'll probably get the same score as green, maybe.
Okay.
But typically, you're going to probably finish behind green in that scenario. Yeah. So.
Good news on that though. Red has to do 2 turns and refinish. Even if they already finished, they still have to do 2 turns and refinish. So they'll finish behind green and blue. If you say protest.
So, yeah, you really need to say protest in that scenario. Okay, here's another example that we just talked about. but slightly different. So there's no overlap when red gets to the zone here. So it's crucial to say when red hits that zone, say 3 boat lengths. Establish your rights that you're clear ahead. Red will say, blue, I'm clear ahead, 3 boat lengths, no room. And now blue can sail, or excuse me, red can sail to the finish line without worrying about blue, or could squeeze blue off potentially. I mean, that's really what you want to do, what red would want to do. Like, let's say red's going slow here. If there's no mark room, red should sail right next to the mark. And don't give blue any room to get in here at all. And be right next to it. So the related piece, oh shoot, this isn't it. Oh shoot. Well, this is the same mark room thing.
Oops.
Hold on. So this is mark room here. The same mark room applies. Green's going to have, because red is overlapped with blue and blue is overlapped with green, then red needs to give mark room to green. So what red should do in this scenario, if you have to give mark room, is don't try to pinch them off, but bear off and get speed. Red should bear off to get speed to finish ahead from a tactics standpoint. So I should have had, there should be another animation that didn't get on here, but boats, if you have another boat, well, let me answer Jim's question. The committee boat is not a mark, question mark, regarding room to finish. The committee boat is a mark and at the finish line. So the same mark room applies at the committee boat, just like at the pin. So the more difficult piece is, let's say you have a boat on starboard coming in here. Here, you have a boat coming in like this. So here, you have a boat on starboard. This happens all the time on here. Right? Boat coming in on starboard here at the finish line, right at the mark. All these boats are coming in on port. Green, my drawing has right of way over the rest of these boats because there's no mark room. Mark room only applies when there's an overlap. Just like coming in at the windward mark, these boats are on a port ley line. And this drawing is on a starboard ley line. So it's the same concept. The green comes in, or excuse me, my drawing comes in on starboard and can force all those 3 boats to, can force all these 3 boats to stay out of the drawing's way.
Does that matter whether or not the drawn in boat on starboard hits the 3 boat length circle first or second, third, or fourth?
Doesn't matter. No.
Regardless,
if you're on starboard, you need to be coming in. You can do whatever you want at the finish line.
But does that also apply at the on the rounding marks, or is that set of rules different?
No, same rules.
Same rules. So the 48, the circle around the marks, finishing or otherwise, aren't magic in terms of the starboard port right of way rule.
So if you look back at that outline, which is number 9 on page 4, if you read the rule 18.2, both of those rules they talk about overlap. When boats are overlapped, the outside boat, 18.2A, when boats are overlapped, 18.2B, if boats are overlapped. So there's no overlap between starboard and port because
Right.
they're on different tacks. That's why, that's how that works. And that's why when you're going, like overlap is a lot more important going downwind because that's when the overlaps always happen. Typically going upwind, it's always a starboard and port situation. Typically it's a starboard and port situation.
Got it. Thank you.
So communication is the most important part of the rules. And it really goes, I'd say it really takes over, kind of trumps the rules a lot of times because you really, the more you talk, like Bill Colburn isn't on here anymore, but he is, I don't think he's ever probably been in a protest committee. He doesn't get, he avoids other boats because it's faster to, or I should say the other way, it's slower to start yelling at someone or get into an argument with someone than just to sail your own race and keep going. And also I want to also reiterate or reinforce what Bill said, that we are on Lake Harriet very much I think sailing in general is going this way, is that we're a friendly, it's a friendly sport, meaning that we don't have we don't want to be yelling at each other or swearing at each other. Part of the rules, the kind of fair sailing and just sportsmanship is that we're not, yelling, I don't know, swearing at each other. I think that's very inappropriate. And it's even like yelling at each other. It's okay to in an angry way. It's okay to yell to make sure you're heard, but not in an angry way, because we're trying to build sailing and not like push people away from it. So we try to be as friendly as possible. Any other so that's the end of my presentation. Any other questions or scenarios that you guys are thinking about from a rules standpoint? And if we're down at the lake and you guys ever want to discuss rules, I'm always game for that. Well, we do that a lot. We'll get the whiteboard out and draw what happened, and we can go through rules and talk through them, because there's always, Anthony and I have had multiple conversations about rules afterwards, about who is right and who is wrong. And there's disagreements about rules, even people who sail a lot and think they know, even myself, sometimes I get it wrong. So it's not I don't know everything. Or sometimes you get flustered and you think you did something right. There was a story that I remember, Robert Netzer, who doesn't sail on Lake Harriet anymore. He had a GoPro on his boat on the front of his mast that he used to have. And one time I was sailing on port and I tacked right in front of him. I thought I was clear ahead, had room, and he protested me. I did my turns anyway, but I was still telling him, no, I had room. I don't need to do turns. Well, then he emailed me that night with the video from the GoPro showing that I tacked right in front of him. So, so understand that you can definitely have differences of opinion and kind of where you are out there, and don't feel bad. Even if you follow someone, don't feel bad about it. Just do your turns and keep sailing.
And just to be clear, that's not why Robert Netzer is not sailing anymore.
No, I think he went on to other things, I think.
He's going to become president or something.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get into team racing, I mentioned at the beginning, we're hosting a team racing regatta on Lake Harriet in September. And that's very rule oriented, where you're using the rules a lot more to your advantage. And so I would recommend that if you want, we're going to do some team racing as we get closer to that event. And I hope you guys join us in that.
Didn't we used to do that during Aquatennial?
We did. It's been moved around now. It was on Upper Minnetonka for a while, and now we're back on. We're going to host it on Harriet, the Commodore's Cup weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you again for doing this really great, really informative review of the rules. I know I benefit, even though I've been racing for quite a while. It's like a great way to warm up your brain, and is to right of way and keeping safe and staying in the game. Thank you again. Cynthia had to leave early, and so she would be on here promoting. She'd be saying thank you to Joe, and also mentioning that we have another presentation next Saturday featuring Ryan Grosh and Joe Reinke. And is Ryan? Yeah, Ryan, can you tell us what the topic is?
Is he still there?
Yeah, he's here.
He may have stepped away from his computer, but we're going to have another great presentation next Saturday at 9:30, and then we have on water practice on Wednesday nights in May, starting the first Wednesday after the 8th. I'm thinking that's maybe the 10th or something like that, but the first Wednesday after we launch our boats on the 8th will be a practice night. So I just wanted to.
May 12th.
Yep, very good, very good. Those were my housekeeping items, Joe. I'm going to turn the mic back over to you and say thanks again, everyone, for coming out.
Yep, thank you guys. And if you have any questions, follow up, feel free to send me an email and or give me a call, and I'm happy to talk through it. Anything that anyone wants to. So we will see you guys soon.
I have a question. It's Hilda. Did I kept losing you, and then you'd like cut out, and then I'd pick you up. So if nobody else had that, then I have an internet problem.
Did anyone else have that issue?
I did not.
To me the whole time.
Okay, I have an internet problem. Thank you.
No problem. Well, get your boats ready. We're a month away from our first race, so it's time to get everything ready to go. Okay. We'll see you guys. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks,
Great
Joe.
job. Great job, Joe.
Thank you.